Welcome to Table Talk here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world, well over 13 years strong. And we've got a great guest this week. We heard him on the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show earlier this year when we were at the Reading Hot Stovers annual banquet. We have with us, boy, I got to tell you, it's a real treat. It really is. Former Major League Baseball outfielder, an Emmy award-winning journalist, ESPN baseball analyst, an author, an educator whose work explores baseball as a lens for understanding culture, identity, and community. And I mean, I could keep going on, but I do want to promote his book as well. His book, The Game from Where I Stand, a ball player's inside view. We've got the one and only Doug Glanville. My friend, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here.
Yeah, Jeff, it's been a pleasure to get to know you from the hot stove.
Yeah.
So, it was a great experience. And, it's awesome to reconnect. I know we've been in touch. So, looking forward to kicking it around with you.
Absolutely. And look, I want to start, if you don't mind, Doug, the conversation with the Reading Hot Stovers. It's an organization that, I've been affiliated with in some way, shape, or form from an outside perspective for a while. One of my good friends is on their board, and they do such good work within the Eastern Pennsylvania and specifically the Berks County community. And when we were speaking at the Reading Hot Stovers annual banquet earlier this year, you got to know the organization a little bit better. And I'm wondering, what is it about the Reading Hot Stovers and their mission that really resonates with you? And what has impressed you most about the way that they support the community through their scholarship program?
Yeah, I mean, I love this organization because I just think it's, I grew up under educators, right? So my mom taught in middle school, and I guess we called it junior high then. And when I graduated high school, she followed me. She was a math teacher. So my father, who ultimately was a psychiatrist, was an educator in Trinidad and Tobago before he came to the United States. So I think I start there. And I always think of the foundation of a community and really to create a connectivity between generations. So much of it flows through education.
Yes.
And of course, when I see that connected through sport and particularly baseball, that's something I automatically feel a connection. And I think the Reading Hot Stovers, you talk about legacy and time. This is an organization that has a long history.
Oh, yes.
That has consistently really elevated the importance of the power of education, giving back, paying it forward, and really celebrating people who have committed to combine this really challenging needle you have to thread between athletics and academics. So I just have nothing but good things to say about, outside of just my experience in being part of the event, there was so much that the work that continues. And I know everybody who works so hard behind the scenes to make these connections. So I just, I hope, I know the community's behind it. I encourage people to continue to support the effort.
Absolutely.
Because it just goes to a good cause.
Absolutely. Real quick plug, folks. Search out the Reading Hot Stovers. They do such fantastic work in the community, as Doug was just talking about. And as we're moving forward with the conversation here, Doug, I wanted to bring things kind of back to something we were talking about on this podcast platform this past week in terms of Major League Baseball and where Major League Baseball is going, not only with the game, but really from a tech standpoint, because there's always been this kind of underlying feeling. And we get this here with one of my co-hosts who's very much a traditionalist when it comes to baseball. Myself, I'm more along the lines of, okay, let's modernize the game, modernize the sport. But, sometimes I think things can maybe go a little too far in sport. So like I said, recently on the podcast, we were having a discussion where we were talking about Major League Baseball has now banned AI in the dugout. And my co-host and I both thought, this is a good move since AI really could mess with the integrity of the game while it's actually being played on the field here. So I'm wondering, what are your specific thoughts about Major League Baseball's decision to do this? Good, not good, maybe somewhere in between? What are your thoughts here?
Well, for starters, you have to make the deliberate effort to try to define how you want technology to weave into your culture. Because if you don't, it will define you. I mean, it's because the speed of this information, we don't even need to look at baseball to understand in our daily lives. If you're not saying, to your kids, or you're trying to say, here's how we incorporate the technology. Yes, I understand it's part of it, and maybe it makes things easier, maybe, but we don't want it to write your whole paper, for example. We want it to be a supplement. It's just the regulatory components to it.
Yeah.
And sport, there's something culturally you're trying to preserve. It's not a science. It's not something that you could say, oh yeah, you need to have, this many innings, or you have to have something always measurable. You just know that you're trying to preserve something that you want to maintain as part of the cultural center of the sport. And that's something you have to be very intentional about.
Yeah.
And technology's coming. It's coming. And it's like, because eventually you could decide, like, we want a video game. We just want to play a video game. And that may be the direction you go in. But if you want to have the humanity at the center, it's sort of like with umpires, right? If you could have robots all over the field and just have, and just say, if that's what you decide, but then you have to understand what you're losing. And nothing is clearer than like ABS, right? They first started with a strike zone that was three-dimensional, and the curveball was hitting the top of the back of the plate.
Yep.
That doesn't look right. And it was all like, it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right. Okay, so then they made a two-dimensional plane, and they moved it forward, and they said, oh, the curveball is hitting the front of the zone and dropping in the dirt. That's not right. So they moved it, right? But it was a construct. It wasn't perfection. It was just something agreed upon, and the cultural aspect of it drove it. So look, I'm an engineer, and that's what I studied in college. I have a great appreciation of innovation, and I think it's important, but I think it's equally important to make sure how you want it to fuse into the culture of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. The integrity of the game, I think, is really important, and there's a balance. Absolutely. And I think that's what you're talking about, that balance, and making sure that, at the end of the day, there's not that much more of maybe an edge for one particular team or a sport, what have you. And I think, to follow up on that as well, Doug, AI is obviously being used by front offices to evaluate talent at various levels. And I'm wondering if you think the analytics world that baseball is really living in has actually maybe gone a little bit too far in terms of how much stake front offices really put into analytics, or maybe should the analytics data go further, in your opinion, in terms of baseball analysis here? What are your thoughts here?
Well, when I prepare for games, for example, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's technology I'm researching. I understand that. But then part of my preparation is data driven, right? I look and okay, his swing rate, his tempo, all these things. But then I spend as much time talking to the managers, sitting at the batting cage and talking to the players, asking them all these things about how they feel about this. And then I kind of understand that I need to synthesize those to really create a effective broadcast, right?
Yeah.
So, but if I just sat on my phone and just researched, I'd have very much one-sided opinion if I had no conversations with anybody.
Right.
So if you don't intentionally put humanity at the center, it will not be in the center. And I understand, like, if you're evaluating talent and you get information quicker, because, like, when I taught my courses, for example, in college, I wanted them to write the papers because it was a writing class right now. Because if I wanted just AI to spit it out to me, then I would have asked for that. And then it would have been a very different course. Right. So I understood that when they were looking up the history of sports and society in 17th century Italy, maybe they used AI to get an effective search, to get a quote off of something that they couldn't find easily. Okay, I understand that. It's different than saying, let me take this and write the whole thing. So I think in baseball, you have to continue to look for that equilibrium, and the more you have to and accept the trade-offs, right? If I'm going to go all in this direction, knowing that you're going to be losing something,
right?
And
you're talking about balance, like I was saying. Absolutely. Like, there's a balance with all this.
Yeah. And then so you can evaluate. I understand you evaluate talent and you make decisions on things that you could get information quicker or more efficiently. But then, like, the model that you create to assess those things has its own bias, because you're generating the algorithms behind the scene come from humanity, comes from some assumptions, and you can't escape that. And so you have to know, like, where the fail safes are, because the outcomes, it has to be more than just about the outcome. I think that's right. But that's the challenge at times, because you can become so outcome driven that you forget how important it is to how you drove there in the first place.
That's a great way to look at it. Fantastic way to look at it. Again, folks, we're talking to Doug Glanville. Head on over to DougGlanville.com. My friend, I know you're on Substack, correct? As well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are definitely on Substack. I think it's DougGlanville.substack.com. If folks want to head over there and see what Doug is posting every now and again. But we are going to take a quick break. And when we get back, want to get into your career a bit and talk about some interesting stories as well. Folks, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a bit. All right, we are back with Doug Glanville, and as we are moving along with the conversation here, Doug, in terms of talking with you earlier this year, again, the Reading Hot Stovers annual banquet, and thinking about our discussion here as we are in the summer of 2026 and thinking about your career, man, you played one of the most demanding positions in baseball, center field. And before StatCast and advanced positioning came into the fray, I mean, I can't imagine what game preparation was really like, to be honest with you. I wonder how much of playing center field was really instinct versus preparation, because you didn't have digital tablets that would display heat maps and spray charts, things that players are using these days to help their game along. So how back in the day, how would you prepare for hitters when you were playing in the big leagues?
Well, a lot of it was, I guess my iPad was like John Vukovich, or, my coach was, right? So
yes.
We had spray charts, and so we had a lot of like handwritten data
right
that we looked at, and it would literally be a chart of a field and show you where the hitter had hit the ball, different kind of pitches. So you got a lot of information from that. You had coaches that, you can make adjustments in game that would help you. And then you just watch the game unfold. I started saying, okay, Randy Wolf's pitching. He's not quite as sharp on his changeup away. So when the catcher sets up the way, I got to be mindful that he might leak it over the plate, or, Kurt Schilling is doing X with his fastball. That would inform you on how much to shift or how much to move, and anticipation. So I learned under Jimmy Pearsall, who was a great coach.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was all about moving as the pitch entered the zone. You were always in motion, you were anticipating, and it was informed motion. So I think that is where I came from. So we had the same ability, but a lot, I'd say, to have information in a different form. But we also had a lot of power. I felt as a center fielder when I played, I had a lot of power to be like, oh, we're moving. All right, Bobby, move in.
Yeah.
Pat Burrell, let's go. I could tell people based on things that I would see. And, and I understood the spacing of it. So that was really cool. I think one great summation of this is one year I was working for Marquee Sports Network, interviewing Albert Almora Jr. Okay. He was a first-round pick with the Cubs, really good defender. And so it was an active interview. I literally had a ball and I was throwing him baseballs, and he was going back and I was talking me through it. And at one point I explained Jimmy Pearsall and how I used to get jumps. And I'd say, okay, the ball's in the zone. I demonstrated it. And then I finally finished my 3-minute spiel about this. And then I asked them directly, well, how do you get your jumps? Like, what do you do? He's like, you know what? I don't know if I do all that, because from the data, I'm already where I'm supposed to be. Oh. So if I do all my running around, I'm actually running away from the most likely spot where the ball's going to be.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so I think that sums up like what the data can do. Like, he didn't need to do all this stuff, so he thought, because the data said this is where the ball is most likely to land.
Yeah.
So you're already there.
Yeah.
And so it took away a lot of the anticipation and leaned into the data. So I think that's just something that kind of sums up the generations of how that data is implemented.
Do you wish you had that back when you were playing? Do you know what I mean? Do you kind of wish you had that a little bit?
I mean, I would have enjoyed it. I like the information, but I still never would have gotten fully away from, okay, yeah, that's great in a perfect vacuum.
Yeah.
But the game isn't a perfect vacuum.
Right.
Like, Kurt Schilling is missing his fastball today by 3 inches, and he's forced into the zone, and Gary Sheffield pulls the ball all the time. Like, you'd have to just, your eyes are part of it. And right. I know we have our own biases, but the game does dictate a lot. And And I think you need that. So it's information, right? You take it and you use it and you create a plan, and then the game happens, and then you
Yeah,
have to adjust.
absolutely. Oh man. Well, as we're moving along here, I wanted to talk about the certain era of baseball that you played through, and you played through the steroid era of baseball. And I'm certainly not going to get into any specific players or anything like that with this particular topic here. But what I have found interesting in terms of reflecting on this particular era of Major League Baseball is I'm wondering when baseball players really began to realize that baseball was changing physically to the point where they needed to do something else from a more competitive standpoint. And looking back, I wonder if there were any maybe misconceptions about that era of baseball that perhaps get lost because of how the human body evolves, especially when you're a professional sports athlete. Again, when players realizing that baseball was really changing physically here. Can you kind of get into that? And again, were there any misconceptions about that era of baseball that perhaps maybe get lost every now and again?
Well, I mean, I think it's yeah, it was kind of a terrible time in some ways. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that there was a lot of fun because I think the indicators, like when Sosa McGuire had their home run race, the world was paying attention,
Oh
and
yeah.
I mean, and that was magnetic for baseball. But at the same time, there was kind of a dishonesty underneath it, right? That we were kind of in denial about on some level, or we weren't sure,
Yeah.
and then we were trying to marry that with legality, ethics, principle, fairness, and all these things. I think that made it something that we had to flush out further to understand once again what to the point about, well, what kind of sport do you want to have? I
Yeah.
mean, you could have WWE or whatever, and if that's what you want, that's entertaining and people pay for that and they're icons. But then you're trying to be transparent about, like, okay, well, everybody just take whatever you want.
Right.
But that's not what baseball defined, and outside of just the legal questions. And so, we had a problem, and I think we're still really dealing with it, right? And I don't think that's the consequence of it, because you
Yeah.
just don't know. It became some way of not trusting the numbers. You didn't trust the numbers, and you
Yeah.
didn't trust your opponents. You didn't trust your teammates on certain level about like what they were doing or not doing. Just keep in mind, like, yeah, you're in the same dugout and you have a family and a brotherhood with your teammates, but at the same time, there's various times in your career you're fighting for the same job with somebody,
Right.
and maybe you lose and you end up being the fourth outfielder, but maybe you lose and you don't make the team, right? So the consequences are real, and you want everybody to at least have some semblance of level playing field in that approach.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it colored the expectation of what power hitters look like and what positions. Because it used to be, second baseman, oh, they don't hit him run. Oh no, that changed. Center
Yeah.
fielder, that changed.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're a hit player like I was, I'm not hitting 40 home runs,
Right.
and so all of a sudden it became, oh, well, we just need your glove in the ninth inning or the eighth inning. We don't need you. We'll get someone to hit home runs for the first five,
Yeah.
and it started to change. So, it was very consequential. So, and like I hear all the debates, and every year the Hall of Fame election comes and people debate, and I do worry that we're going to eventually have amnesia, because time
Yeah.
goes by and you're just like, well, wasn't that bad? And
Right. Right.
then, each generation who's trying to define their future will have a new vote. And I certainly welcome that, which is why you have to keep reminding people that this had a real impact and it was not fair. And just because there's a lot of what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas, and players are kind of afraid to talk about it because you don't want to sell anybody out, isn't a reason to not really, be like conscious of how you understand it. And I've been spoke out quite a bit about it. And I just, I look, I'm torn at different times because there's guys I played with, against, that I, really had a brotherhood with and I appreciate. And, they did it or they didn't do it. And I still understand what we went through. And
Yeah.
it's not, but at the same time, you also want to call it out.
Yeah.
And I think the players that were the greatest players of my generation, which by the way, so many were implicated in this,
Yeah. Yep.
It is a little hard to accept. People say, well, this guy, like, I was drafted one pick in front of Manny Ramirez, and I hear about that all the time, right? I
Right.
was like, well, I made a little different choices than he did, right? So
Right.
it's like, so it's like, is it apples and apples? Not really,
Right.
and that's just documented. That's evidence. So, yeah, so I do struggle with that at times because I want the game, to just be fair,
Right.
basically.
I appreciate your honesty about it because, like you said, I think we're still, and I don't think, I know we are still feeling the effects of that era to this day. And I would venture to say that even in the decade to come, we are still going to be reckoning with that and with that particular era and how people view baseball in general. So I appreciate your honesty with it. And before I let you go, Doug, and to close this out here, I'm hoping you could actually share some of your memories, if you don't mind, from the batter's box. Wondering first which pitchers really made you uncomfortable every time you stepped into the batter's box, if you don't mind maybe going there. And was there a pitcher whose stuff looked even better in the batter's box than on television? If you can give some thoughts here, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I always think of this in two ways. Like, one is comfort is one,
Yeah.
and then there's the others is like a results driven thing.
Okay.
So, all right, for example, Randy Johnson, not a comfortable at bat, but I hit him pretty well. I hit him pretty
Yeah.
well, and because when all is said and done, there's all these pitchers that are incredible to face, but you really do love it. Like, that's the challenge. Like, yeah, I want to knock down Goliath. That's the
Yeah.
point.
Right.
So and it's not saying that you didn't wake up with sweaty palms in the middle of the night, but you welcome this at a certain point. And I knew at a certain point for me, or any player goes through this, that if you get a hit off this guy, you're kind of immortalized. Like, that's where it starts. And I remember my first time I faced Randy Johnson when he was recovered from his back surgery or injury, and we were playing in spring training as Cubs Mariners, and Randy Johnson was pitching, and I couldn't believe I was like in the lineup.
Yeah.
And I'm some like rookie trying to make the team.
Right.
But I figured if I'm supposed to strike out against this guy.
Right.
If I don't, I'm doing something amazing. And I end up hitting a triple off him. And it was like, oh, okay. That's just that moment of like, I've arrived,
Yeah.
So I think he was really uncomfortable because he threw so hard. He was unafraid to come in. And I don't think he got enough credit how good his command became as he got older. So I think, but then there's guys like Kirk Reuter, I can't even pronounce his name right half the time. It's because Reuter, this dude, ground ball to short, ground ball to short, ground ball to second, ground ball to second. Or Greg Maddux, you not uncomfortable at all, not uncomfortable at all, except you're 0 for 4 every time. Like, that's so there's stuff, right?
Yes.
There's like Armando Benitez stuff, and then there's guys at Tom Glavine that you just twist up in a pretzel,
right?
And can't figure out how you haven't got a hit in a week,
Yeah.
So that's what was fun about it.
What a great conversation, folks. Again, he is Doug Glanville. Head on over to his Substack, DougGlanville.substack.com, and also head on over to his website, DougGlanville.com. You can follow him on Twitter/X, Doug Glanville. Also over on Facebook at Doug Glanville 9. Also, he's on Blue Sky. You're all over the place. Just search out Doug over there as well. Instagram as well, Doug.Glanville. My friend, seriously, thank you so much for taking the time here to jump on our Table Talk interview show this week. It was a pleasure. At some point down the road, I'd love to bring you back on, talk more Major League Baseball, where the game is going. I'd love to do that down the road.
Yeah, Jeff, sounds great. Anytime.